All right, I think in the interests of time, let's make a start. So good morning and a warm welcome to everyone joining us today for our third webinar in our 2021 Private Company Series webinar series. My name is Brendan Kossagan and I'm a partner based down in KZN, and it's my pleasure to host everyone today. As 2021 unfolds, the business landscape remains dominated by COVID-19 and the global response to its effects. But the pandemic will pass, and one of its most lasting effects may be to accelerate a range of disruptions that were here before its onset, and that will continue long after it has subsided. But what are the most important ongoing challenges or issues that private and family business are facing this year, and in their long-term impact on the business community? During this series, we will focus on the issues we think are most important to you to consider in 2021. You can look forward to future webinars on cybersecurity, corporate governance, and ESG. Today, it's my pleasure to welcome Pieter Theron, Maura, Jarvis, and Laverne Ramshabi, who will dive into 5 practical areas for companies to consider when it comes to building digital IQ and adapting to the world of digital first. Pieter is responsible for digital transformation within PwC South Africa's Operational Transformation Division, and is the South African sponsor of Industry 4.0. Maura leads the Workforce of the Future and the New World New Skills program for PwC in South Africa, while Laverne specializes in agile organizational design, workforce strategy and transformation, and the digital upskilling and learning. Together, they are passionate about activating thinking around digital transformation opportunities and helping companies of all sizes and across industries to prepare for the future. There will be time for Q&A at the end of the team's presentation, and you are most welcome to post any queries you may have in the chat box in the bottom right corner of your screen at any time during the presentation. If you do, please be sure to address it to everyone, as we'd like to encourage an interactive session. With that, over to you, Pieter.
Thanks, Brendan, and thanks for that introduction. So thank you everybody for sharing this time with us. I'm going to be, should I go through this? I think I'm not going to go through this, but Brendan has said in the bottom right hand corner, you can then see the chats, and you're welcome to post it there. I'm just going to skip through this to get us to our topic today. So really, as Brendan has introduced, digital is a big issue for everybody. A lot of buzzwords are being kicked around, and often people confuse what is going on there, and they think digital is all about the technologies, where actually digital is a mindset. And just to bring us into context of where we were, a number of industrial revolutions have taken place, not all in our lifetime, but really, if we look at Industry 4.0, it's about the digitization and integration of value chains and products and services. And that's really what we're point. And often in conversation, they are talking about the technologies that are sitting around the site here. IoT, you've probably heard those buzzwords, 3D printing, blockchain, augmented reality, and the like. And people think using those are digital transformation, but it's actually not. What digital transformation, what these technologies do, they are enablers, and those enablers create a huge amount of data that we can use that were previously not possible. Just think about an IoT device that can generate data to be used now. And all these reflect that companies need to have this as a core capability, and ultimately it enables 3 kinds of things in the company. The first thing is the integration of horizontal and vertical value chains. Now, what does that mean? A horizontal value chain is yourself connecting to your suppliers and your customers. That's a horizontal value chain. A vertical value chain is connecting devices, shop floors, operations with the boardroom. So previously people used ERPs to interact with the business. Now it's actually possible to interact with the truck on a road via an IoT platform, for example. So that's the first thing that we do. These technologies give us capabilities to cause this integration. The second thing is the digitalization of product and service offerings. And I mean, just think about the Uber example, where previously you had to pick up a telephone line and phone a taxi. controller and order a taxi if you want transport. Now there's an app that you can use to get that. And I think you've probably heard that many times. So it's really the digitalization of products and service offerings. And the last one is really to develop new digital business models. And often we see companies are changing the way that they are structured and they are operating. And Laverne will get back to that later on when she talks about agile organizations. And we do see this is actually, in our view, what Industry 4.0 is. It's these new capabilities that it gives the organization. And companies battle to, let me just get my pointer back. So companies battle to get real return on digital investment. And we've done some research, and I'm going to be covering a sort of a eagle flight on 4 researches we've done over the last couple of years. And the first thing that we see, only 5% of companies really do everything they can and get real payback from digital. And we're calling them transcenders because they're resilient and they win in digital. If we say, where's the benefits? If we see what other companies are doing, and these things on the right-hand side here, are the things that the reasons why people invest in digital transformation. But just look at this. Only 42% of those companies that are not transcenders get return or increase on their profits. So where the transcenders, they get much higher return. Only 59% of them save costs. The majority of them gets a better customer experience. I do think it's great. I do think it's great that we get those returns, but from a customer experience perspective. So as I see my signal is a bit bad. Are you guys okay with the audio there? Hopefully it's still okay. I've switched off the video, so hopefully that's much better. So the transcenders are really, they do 4 things that are really different. They build a resilient culture, they mandate change, they invest like they mean it, and they make people their superpower. And that's really, I'm going to briefly talk you through that and give you some more detail around that. What does it mean to be having a resilient culture? It means that change will be constant. And we've seen that these transcenders, 67% of them emerge much stronger from a major disruption in the last 2 years, like COVID. They had platforms in place to work remotely, where many companies didn't even have that. After one of our clients, the staff didn't have laptops, so they were still on desktops. So from that perspective, people who were not prepared to work remotely had a great difficulty to restart their business. But people are saying we're going to change constantly, and that's the way that they think. The second thing is they mandate change. It's easy to talk about technologies and what we should do in the business, etc. These companies mandate change, and they do something about it. They don't just talk about it. Thirdly, they invest. If you mandate change, you say, let's do something about it, you have to put some money in it. And we see that the transcenders invest 33% more than other companies in this space to get the return. And the last thing is they put their people first. And we're going to focus on that this morning as well, the back end of this presentation. We see that the transcenders put people first, and they've upended their training process and invest heavily in their staff. So often when we have these conversations, people are saying that we will lose our jobs, and digital will cost our jobs. And okay, let me see. I've got a problem with my audio. I think let's jump to Maura, and then I will just come back on this. Maura, can you take over session?
Hi, everybody. So the story of technology is that it's always fantastic when it works 100%, and not so fantastic works. So Pieter the and I just want to make sure that you're not experiencing the same issue from my side. So I'm going to continue unless otherwise instructed. So I think maybe just to recap on what Pieter was saying, just around the whole issue is that, often we focus a lot on technology, but actually technology needs to be people-centered. And so you can see here from a transcender point of view, the need to upskill is absolutely critical, and the investment to happen there, as well as people are not going to want to join an organization when they see that there's not an investment in upskilling and digitization. I think, Pieter, would you want to get another shot now and see your reception?
Okay, let's see if we can carry on. Can everybody hear me okay? Sachin, can you just tell me if it is all go? I'm sort of competing with bandwidth with my household here. Apologize for that. Sachin, can you guys hear me okay?
This is much better, Pieter.
Okay, thanks, Mia. Sorry about that. It wasn't intended, but let's see if we carry on. So really, it's about putting people first things. Thanks, Vanessa, for responding. So what we've done over the last couple of years, since 2016, we've done various pieces of research that we brought out every 2 years, 2016, 2018, and our most recent research at the end of last year. 33 countries, South Africa inclusive, a lot of industries at the bottom here. So agriculture, for example, would sit here in the food and beverage industry. So we think we've got a very good set of data as to what these transcenders would do to achieve all these benefits. And I think that's really what I want to present to you this morning to help you think about this. And you're welcome to pop me questions in the sidebar when we talk about this. What we've seen the transcenders or digital operations champions are doing, they're investing in 4 areas in their business. The first one at the top there is the customer solution ecosystem. That is really how do we interact with our customers. The second one is their core operations. You're a manufacturer, your plant. If you're an agriculture-driven company, it's your packing facilities, your logistics. People are investing in technology. It's really, we've spoken about those digital innovations, those emerging technologies can make a difference, but also in platforms. People are investing. And obviously the last one is the people ecosystem that are really core for us. And I'm going to say it a couple of times. Digital transformation is not about losing jobs. It's about reskilling today's workforce for the future. Even in PwC, we are investing greatly in digitally upskilling everybody from an associate to partner level to really face the future. Our business is changing, so is yours, and therefore we all have to invest in this area. Why are they doing this? The first thing is they get better revenue increases. So when we compared the digital champions with digital novices, we've seen that digital champions are on average experiencing much greater returns on the investment. On average, people are getting about a 14-15% uplift in revenue from their digital investments. And that's really the key for us. When you look at digital transformation, you have to look at ways to increase your revenue. Otherwise, you are just buying toys and doing things maybe in a different way, but it may even cost you more money. The second element there on the right-hand side, efficiency gain, cost reduction, 12% increase in efficiencies, or similarly from a cost reduction perspective. So really what we're saying is people get payback from the digital investment. If you are just investing in something because it's a fad or something nice to do, then you're wasting your money. You should be thinking about, how do I take my business to the next level? And that's what I'm going to briefly talk about, giving you some of those ideas. The first ecosystem I want to talk about is the customer solution ecosystem, the one at the top there of our pyramid. And that's really how do we interact with our clients. If I can first draw your attention here on the right-hand side, that we're seeing digital champions are already earning more than 50% of their revenue from totally digital products or digitally augmented services. So a digital product would be you developing an app, putting it on the Apple or the Google Play Store, and you're selling that app. That is a digital product. A digitally augmented product would be the Uber example I've mentioned before, or even digitally enabling your service technicians to go out to clients to service their piece of equipment before the equipment breaks down, for example. But really important here, a vast majority of digital champions are already earning more than 50% of their revenue today. If you look at the trend towards the future, the trend for traditional products will decrease. So we'll see people are selling widgets less and less in the future, and they will do digitally enhanced products and purely digital services more into the future than what they're doing today. So really that should be a key for you to start thinking, how can I augment my current product set, even if I'm doing widgets, by digitally enhanced services or trying to digitize my services in totality. The second thing that people are doing in this space are really their customer interaction platforms. And once again, if we look at the top there, most people are having some sort of omni-channel interaction with their clients today. And that means that you have an internet presence or an app where people can either interact with you, place orders, look at products, and they can also walk into a showroom or interact with a sales executive or a salesperson to buy their products. So this is definitely, I think it was part of the last couple of years where people started investing into the internet. If you move down on this pyramid here, if you look at digital champions, 50% already have a digital business model. In other words, they are selling purely digital products, i.e. my app that I have on the internet. And we are interacting with more and more companies. I've interacted with an agri client in this last week where they are developing a blockchain solution for the industry. Now, they're traditionally not an IT company or a technology company, but they've realized that some of their businesses may be totally intermediate or disintermediated through technology or other technologies that are becoming available, and they need to drastically change their business model. And that's why they're starting to develop total digital products for the future. The second thing is, if we look into the operations ecosystem, this middle block there, first thing here is supply chain maturity. Once again, if you look on the right-hand side, digital champions, 55% of them has got near real-time end-to-end integration and planning platforms across the external network. That means that they are already seeing inventory sitting in their suppliers. They're already seeing inventory sitting with their customers, and they can in real time plan production, plan procurement, plan sales, plan deliveries, and drive that entire value chain. So that's just something to think about once again, where digital novices, you'll see the bulk of them are only investing in individual solutions, maybe a production planning solution or a tracking solution for their trucks. And that's really, once again, something that one should think about is, how do I really change my entire way of doing business and have that visibility across my entire supply chain going into the future? And how are our supply chains changing? It's changing from siloed supply chain functions into an orchestrated end-to-end connected supply chain ecosystems. It's changing from planning not connected end-to-end to a synchronized closed loop end-to-end planning, into a single source of data. We've seen it so many times that people have got multiple databases, multiple sources. You don't know what's going on with your suppliers. You don't know what's going on with your customers. One needs to create that single source of data, not only backward looking and reacting to that, but also forward looking, using AI to sort of predict the future. We're using artificial intelligence to do demand sensing, to really try and predict what's going to happen next week or the month thereafter, so you can respond to that. A dynamic and efficient supply chain segmentation. We treat all our customers the same at the moment. You should ask yourself, are all my customers the same? Should I treat them all the same? Should I give them all the same service levels? You'll be surprised what you'll find when you look at that and what the cost to your business is, and with a philosophy where you don't do dynamic segmentation and so forth. So once again, we're seeing this, and by the way, we'll share these slides with you, so don't worry, there's a lot of information on it. Why are they doing that? We're talking about increasing inventory turns. So if you look at digital champions are getting like around about 13 times inventory turns, where others are getting in the vicinity of 10. That's a huge investment in working capital by just keeping that extra inventory onto your balance sheet as well. On time in full delivery, much better. So your client satisfaction also much better with these areas. And this is really our view with a few ideas on how this autonomous and connected supply chain look. So if we think about this, it's about, firstly, so I see that supply chain transparency and sustainability. It's really about having the transparency across the entire supply chain. It's about smart logistics, about understanding what's happening in your entire logistics chain. It's about dynamic supply chain segmentation, closed loop integrated planning and execution, and people are using more and more artificial intelligence to drive these capabilities across the business. So what you see in your supply chain is a flow of products and information between yourself, your suppliers, and your customers. Let's look at the manufacturing environment itself. Tomorrow's manufacturing operations are much more complex, and they require real-time information to react and make corrective actions. You may ask yourself a number of questions around your manufacturing operations on the right-hand side here. And all of these are driven by different client pressures. Your end customers want to have smaller lot size. They want products to be customized. I know the car manufacturers, you can almost go online today and custom order your vehicle to be delivered to your specifications at a specific date. We see more of that happening. Also reduction in lead times. If you're in the pharmaceutical industry and you're running out of stock, your client will just buy from the next person in that area. So your customers really demand much better lead times and responsiveness to their question. Constant cost pressure. We see a lot of pressure in the manufacturing environment. I've just read an article this morning about the steel industry and about tariff protection in that industry and about localization and globalization. The challenge here is that we need to put ourselves into a position where we can competitively manufacture goods and services in South Africa so that there's no pressure for our clients to want to procure offshore. And that's really an imperative for us to lower our cost. And we do see technology used often to lower costs in this area. Just some of the things that are people doing on the shop floor for the manufacturers in the school. I'm just going to use a few buzzwords. The first thing there is vertical integration with the so-called manufacturing execution systems, where you can really plan, schedule, and execute your production, quality, inventory, and maintenance. There's huge cost savings to be attained in that area. In the food industry, track and trace is ultra important to really show people what the source of my products are. In the diamond industry, they talk about blood diamonds. How do you prevent those blood diamonds, etc. So track and trace really important. Also know what's going on your shop floor. Predictive maintenance, we see that really is a very emerging sort of capability to have. We see people can reduce their maintenance cost by up to 15% by using predictive maintenance, also knowing when certain pieces of equipment will break down, doing preventive maintenance at suitable times to prevent that breakdown. We've seen people using augmented reality on shop floors where you can actually superimpose user instructions to operators on screens or smart glasses or handheld devices. The use of AGVs or cooperating robots, if you like. So robots interacting with staff. AGV, by the way, is an automated guided vehicle. And something else that we've seen as making emergence is 3D printing, where people initially start reproducing spares on site, but also real products ultimately. So there's a lot of things that can be done on the shop floor in this area. And what we've seen is that, once again, digital champions are investing. If we think about vertical integration, that's really feeding your shop floor up to the boardroom. Really, the digital novices and digital followers are doing this very selectively, where if you think about digital champions are seeing information across multiple plants, internal and external. If you look here on the right-hand side, this area, digital champions are already seeing the entire manufacturing operations on a global scale, if you like. They view all their manufacturing operations in the same view. Now, I know from a private company perspective, perhaps you are not in that position where you've got multiple manufacturing facilities. And that's probably why the best area is to say, how do I increase selectively visibility from my operations, whether it's my shop floor or in my production area, logistics, inventory, and so forth. And these are the kind of benefits that people get from investing in this. I was personally involved in a recent exercise where we worked with the company to increase their capacity up to 20% without capital investment in the sense of buying new pieces of equipment or machines, by just changing the way that you work and giving them some digital tools. We've also been able to reduce their inventory significantly, reduce tens of millions of rand of inventory into the cycle, increasing efficiency. And that's really the bottom line of this conversation from a manufacturing perspective. It's about how do we increase our efficiency in our business, unlocking working capital, increase capacity or throughput without new equipment. I think many of you are operating close to your limits. And then how do I increase my inventory turn in these areas? And that's really where the bulk of the investment should be going in the shop floor area. Lastly, I'm just going to briefly talk about technology, because I've said that technology is really just an enabler rather than the key thing here. And what we see people with manufacturing operations, they are investing in a number of areas. So I've spoken about predictive maintenance, about predicting when equipment fail. Look at what digital champions are doing. 70% of them are already investing in this area, whereas digital novices are really not just experimenting in this area. And that's why these digital champions are getting much better returns in this area. Also, 75% of digital champions are investing in manufacturing execution systems. In other words, production control systems. 87% have invested in integrated end-to-end supply chain. 78%, 80% of them are exploring in the so-called IoT space, and so forth and so forth. Really, what I want to draw your attention is, look where the digital novices are sitting. They are just experimenting in this space. And that's why the digital champions are getting a 15% revenue increase uplift over the digital novices. And that's why they're getting a 12% cost benefit over the digital novices. So just imagine if you think about a business case in a specific area of your business where you think through it properly, you manage to lift your revenue by 15% and drop your cost by 12%. Imagine what that would do to your profitability. And if you can't remember anything else that I've shared this morning, I'd like to leave you with that message to say that your investments should be in those two areas, to say, how do I uplift my revenue? How do I reduce my cost? That is where your investments should go in this area. And that's hopefully the message that you're getting throughout my talk here. We're seeing blockchain is spurring interest, but it hasn't gained much attraction yet. The thing is, with blockchain, you need to have, it's really distributed trust, and we can spend quite an amount of time to talk around blockchain, but it's really to have a blockchain internally in the organization. There's not much benefit in that. But if you have got a value chain with tens of collaborators, and you want to increase trust, you want to increase visibility, you want to increase the use of smart contracts to better make settlements and the flow of money happening, blockchain is definitely a solution. But what we do see that people are investigating this more and more, and sort of piloting certain solutions in this area. And once, as I said, we can spend a lot of time around this, but there are very good applications. This is just something to keep in the back of your mind. If you have those conditions that I've spoken about, it may be worthwhile to explore. Also, digital champions are using AI to turbocharge key capabilities. Really, if you look at the graphs here, it's about supply chain, cost to serve, supply chain segmentation, etc., etc. AI is not a silver bullet. AI is not something that will solve all your problems. I've personally done neural networks, and often you find that a linear model can give you similar results than an artificial intelligence solution. Artificial intelligence should be used where a standard linear model cannot give you the desired outcomes and or accuracy. The difference is today the capability to obtain AI is so much easier. So for example, if you are a Microsoft client and you subscribe to the Azure platform, you can easily just incorporate a AI component, use it, pilot. If it doesn't work, you give it back. It's like software as a service. So really, where a number of years ago you had to go buy an AI package, modeling package, and then something else to run your operations on, it's just much easier today. And I think it's something one has to consider if you're grappling with a business problem driven by data, you can't quite accurately predict or model the outcome. AI is definitely a solution and that you should consider in this area. And with that, I'm going to hand over to my colleague Maura and Laverne, who will talk to you around the people ecosystem in this. Maura, over to you.
Great, thanks, Pieter. Just want to check audio as well, because I know that I was having a little bit of an issue earlier on.
All clear, thanks, Maura.
Excellent. Okay, perfect. So, Pieter, I really liked what you said in terms of if we think about this from a business perspective and we think about uplifting revenue and decreasing costs, which I think is on everyone's agenda. I think what I'd like to just draw your attention to there and start talking about the digital champions is that if you want to uplift revenue and decrease costs, there has to be some investment, and that investment can't only be in the people component, in the technology component, but obviously has a very huge component in terms of the people and the investment that you need to make in upskilling them and getting them ready for this this new world of work. So I think really what we're saying is that the people are the superpower, which is going to take that investment in technology that you have and is going to really give you the traction that you're looking for as an organization. So if we look at, if we on the next slide, I'm not getting control here of being able to move the slides. I don't know if it's been passed to me or not, but possibly somebody could just, can I ask Sachin, can I just ask if you could maybe just drive the slides for me, please? Okay, so if we move on to the next slide. It doesn't seem to be moving on my side. Great, thanks. So I think if we look at digital transformation, I've been working in the field of future world of work since 2017. And when we were starting to have conversations with clients, it really was, if I could say, a slow burn. A lot of people were very interested in this whole concept of the future world of work and what it was going to mean, but there was very little traction that we were getting. And I think that has also come through in terms of having a look at the digital transformation, that companies that have made significant progress in terms of upskilling their staff is really very low, looking at that percentage of 18%. But yet 50% of employees are going to need to be upskilled in the next 5 years. So we are seeing a disconnect there in terms of the actual investment in the upskilling. And then I think when we talk about digital transformation and technology, the first thing, and especially in a South African context, that jumps into people's minds is around job disruption and job loss. But if you actually have a look at what the statistics are telling us around the number of new jobs that are going to emerge by 2025, and bearing in mind that's sort of 4 years away, and we look at that number of 97 million new jobs, you can see that we've got a net gain in new positions. But the question that we've got to ask ourselves is, are our people equipped to be able to fulfill the requirements of those new jobs? And that's not something that we can wake up to in 2025, but is actually got to be something that as organizations you're starting to focus on and prepare for now. And when you talk about what keeps CEOs awake at night, I think that concept of, I know that I need to have a transformation of my organization, but am I going to have the right people with the right skills to be able to drive that investment that I'm making? I think, Pieter, you've spoken very well around the financial demands, around the need to be, reducing costs. That's really high on the agenda. And I think the one thing that one has to take into account here is that although you're needing to decrease costs, your development and your training and your upskilling budgets is not the place to go and find that cost containment. If anything, it's the opposite, that there's an investment that's going to be required to equip people to be able to build the skills that they're going to need in the future. So just some thoughts there. So how do you go about equipping your people agenda to support the transformation, this digital transformation? So what we saw is that they're really the 3 R's, and that's the repair, rethink, and reconfigure. So during our COVID period, I think very much when we spoke to clients, we would talk to them around, the future world and digitization. And often the comment that would come back at us would be, we're just trying to survive at the moment. And that's very much that whole repair component and phase. But what we are seeing now is that, with people starting to come out of the impact of the pandemic, is very much to start thinking about what is my future going to look like for my organization. I need to start planning for that. And once you know what that new vision looks like, it's very much about how do we now redesign in order to be able to make that a reality. So if we take our workforce of the future and look at the demands that are on them and the challenges that you're going to have to adapt to, there are really 3 key areas that pop out. And that's the first thing, and this ties again back to what Pieter was saying, the optimizing of workforce and HR costs, so your people costs. So that's really a driver, and it's going to be something that's on the agenda. The second thing that we're finding is very topical is that I'm also needing to look at performance and productivity. That's another huge driver, no matter what industry you're sitting in. And then the third one is around managing risk, making sure that I've got resilience in the environment and in my people, and obviously looking after my reputation and my brand. So how does the people agenda fit into this? So we've designed and come up with really 4 critical pillars that are going to underpin the organization's ability to optimize costs, drive performance, and manage risk and resilience. And those can be classified into the workforce strategy and transformation. So making sure that you have got the right skills in place, the right people, you understand where it is that you're going to and what you're going to need. Once you understand that, the second pillar is upskilling for this digital world. So knowing what your skills gaps are and investing in interventions that are going to help you to prepare your people to operate effectively in this digital world. The third pillar, we look at both the physical and the digital workspace. What does that look like? New ways of working. How do we equip our organization to be able to operate now in this digital environment? And then the final pillar is around the HR transformation. So if you look at your HR functions at the moment, are they having conversations around the strategic business value and helping to prepare the workforce for this new digital world? So it's really moving your HR, your people, your HC function out of being transactional and moving them into a strategic space where they are starting to contribute to, the 3 big drivers of business performance. So I'm going to hand over now to Laverne to give us some lovely practical examples of what does this mean and how does it unpack in terms of workforce strategies within this digital world. So Laverne.
Great. Thanks so much, Maura, and good morning, everyone. It's really a great honor to be able to talk to you today. I really liked what Maura said, just in terms of, when you think about your workforce and what it needs to look like and so forth, there's various options or components for you to start in. But your starting point is always going to leverage from what is your business strategy from a business perspective, and what people levers do you need to pull or get in place to achieve that overall business strategy? So what I just want to talk through are some practical points where clients in your position started in their journey. So if we go to the next slide. So recently, just finishing off a client, one of their major components that they really were looking at is they went on a very large digital transformation. So there was quite a bit of automation happening within their factories and such. And one of the biggest pain points they felt when that digital implementation started to occur was around the cultural component of the business. And what this specific client wanted to do first, instead of tackling future skills or talent and succession plans, was really to start with, what is my new culture that I need to put in place for this digital transformation to sync and to support my people in this journey. So how they tackled their specific component, and if we hop onto the next slide from a culture perspective, was that they really focused time on putting together a cultural foundation that looked at reinforcing critical behaviors that were rewarded and measured, and also just to help the people or their workforce in terms of using the new technology that was at their disposal. So they really focused on 4 key aspects or areas. The first one was to understand what are the core cultural traits that need to be embedded in this new working environment that will support their workforce, but also define the cultural aspirations. So cultural aspirations aligning to their core values as an organization. So they really spent a little bit of time focusing on this. The next one was to focus on the critical few. Now, when we look at behaviors within a workplace or organization, there can be a large scale of behaviors that we look at. For example, trust or working together or transparency. But really a top tip was you need to always focus on 5 to 6 critical behaviors that are really going to drive your business forward, but enable and empower the organization. So they went through a very engaging exercise with their workforce. They got input from their people in terms of what should our 5 to 6 critical behaviors be that's going to drive our new ways of working going forward, with technology being integrated into their daily operations day to day. They really leveraged both a formal mechanism for driving this new change and an informal mechanism. Formal being that they put structures in place, they put a project team in place, there was governance in place to make sure that the process ran for the cultural work. Informal being that they actually use guys on the ground to help drive some of the behavior, to help be the feedback loop to the management team. You really do want people that have ears to the ground to really help drive the specific process, and that's something that worked really, really well for them. I think culture can sometimes be seen to being fluffy or not measurable. So what they wanted to do is they really wanted to measure the impact of this change from a culture perspective. So they put together a measurement in terms of measuring those behaviors. So that's just a culture example. If we go to the next slide, the next client example that I want to talk to you about is this specific client also on a digital transformation, and they wanted to make sure that the employees were ready for the specific change, and they wanted to make sure that the organizational assessment was really good. So if we hop onto the next slide, how they proposed this part of their engagement is that they did a business and organization strategy assessment. So they went all from number 1, aligning the leadership. So defining what that vision is, defining that leaders are all aligned from a leadership perspective. And then what they really focused on before they started with the implementation of their technology was to assess the readiness of their business. So they did it from a process perspective, they covered it from a people perspective, they covered it from a structural perspective, and they could easily identify some of the key pain points that they would need to resolve for as they decided to implement on their digital transformation. And people was quite a big component on that specific lens. If we hop onto the next slide, another client example that I just want to take us through is when you're implementing digital solutions and when you're having a look at automation, there's definitely going to be an impact on your FTE, their productivity, and their skill. It's quite important that for you to consider that you need to take into account how the skills and construction of teams are going to change during the specific transformation. Skill sets are not going to take or shape in the exact same way because technology, automation is going to impact that a little bit in terms of delivery. So digital upskilling is quite important. It's quite important just to make sure that, number one, before you look at your workforce planning or your upskilling, that you align it to your business strategy. Make sure that your capabilities you identify is going to deliver on that mandate as an organization you've set. And then it's to assess your talent needs. So it's a little bit of data that you're going to be using, a little bit of strategic workforce planning, big consulting word we like to use. But it's really important to understand what is your demand and supply going to be for your workforce and how is that going to change. And really then start to map out your talent or your workforce to those various components. It's then important to not just understand the change, but to put very proactive plans in place. So this specific client, they looked at remediation plans from an upskilling perspective. They looked at remediation plans from a succession perspective. And they looked at remediation plans from a structure perspective. How are we going to cross-skill, cross-blend teams together due to the enhancements that we're making from a delivery perspective in terms of operations? And then obviously it's always important for you to be able to manage and monitor that return, because you do want to get a return on investment if you're going to be investing in digitizing the operations of your business. If we go into the next slide, the slide is more around the skills gap, and I've covered it a little bit, so I'm not going to skip or spend too much time on it, bearing in mind that we have 10 minutes. But I think the one thing I want to zone in on is skills are fundamentally changing. I think if there's one piece of advice, practical advice I can give to you or just share in terms of the conversations we're having with clients at the moment is it doesn't matter how big or small your business is, talent is a key commodity at the moment. So really important just to zone in on what is your upskilling strategy. We live in South Africa. We know that unemployment rates are really high. So it's really hard for organizations to retrench staff. Of course, there's a cost saving that's attached to it. But another alternative cost saving is to upskill or reskill your existing workforce to fulfill some of the new roles you need to start thinking about that's going to hit your specific industries or sector. So upskilling is definitely an alternative, and it's important to understand the implications of those. If we hop onto the next slide. So I think getting your digital transformation agenda right with a people lens, I think it's first and foremost to understand what your pain points are. Your journeys are all going to be completely different from one another depending on your strategy and depending on what your people drivers are going to be. So you never have to start big bang. Start small, start with where your pain points are. Understand what's driving your program from a people perspective. Culture is always a driver, people behavior is always a driver, and bringing people along the journey with you is always a driver. So change management is quite important. Know what the return on investment is, be able to measure it, be able to put KPIs around it, and always continuously get feedback from your employees so you know how to improve the program and really get rid of some of those blockers that might be in the way. I think agility is quite important. It's never going to go as planned. You have to be able to quickly assimilate and amend your plan as you go. And for you to be able to do that, it's to make sure that you're understanding the data that's always should be there, understanding the feedback that you're getting from your workforce, and then also just creating a good framework that brings both your digital lens and your people agenda together. I think, Chris, I already spoke through that quite quickly, but very happy to take questions or conversations after this for anyone that wants to deep dive further, but I'll hand over back to you.
Right, everyone. Maura, Pieter, is there anything that you would like to say in closing? We've got a few minutes left.
I think if there's any questions, we're happy to take some questions now. But hopefully through this morning's conversation, the attendees seeing that digital transformation is real. It's here. People get real benefit. And there are 5 areas that it affects the business. Let's start with the people. That's very important, where we ended off with. We looked at your customers, the customer ecosystem, your core operations, technology, and then overall in terms of new business models and new digital products. So I do think it's something that one should consider, and we're happy to take any other questions. Thanks, Brendan.
So if there are any questions, if you just don't mind putting it down in the chat box, and the team will respond to it. We'll just give you 1 minute to type questions in. I see one's popped up there.
Yeah, maybe I'll take it now, Maura. You're welcome to jump in. The surveys that we've done is across 6 industry verticals. So it's chemicals. Let's say it's starting across manufacturing. So it's consumer goods. It is industrial manufacturing. It's chemicals, and we've seen more or less the same kinds of trends in all those industries. Even in the energy, utilities, and resources, which we haven't surveyed, we've done separate surveys on that. So we do not see a specific industry more prone to some of these things or suitable to it. What we do see is if you don't deliver, if you don't deal with your end customer, probably your customer ecosystem looks slightly different than a company that would have a retail outlet, for example. So all these things are applicable in the greater or lesser areas. And even seeing if you're delivering an industrial product, we've seen companies changing the way that they interact with their buyers. Even though they're not end customers. So you create a portal, a platform where people can interact with your business, order products, etc. So really not a specific industry that's more prone. I do think that telco industry, you've seen it in banking, very right, but the same with manufacturing and other companies.
Pieter, I think if I can just add in there, I think also what we're seeing is where an organization is. So a lot of the startups have been a lot more agile in terms of reacting to digital transformation. And a lot of the older organizations a bit slower. So I think it's also around, to your point about taking into account your customer base, and that agility is something that you've got to be very aware of, despite your size and the age of the organization. I'm not sure if there are any other questions in the chat.
Nothing at the moment. Let's just give it a little bit of time for people to type.
I think just while they're typing, Brendan, I think the one thing is that this whole thing can seem quite overwhelming for organizations, and you might be feeling that it's a little bit of a ball of wool or a pot of spaghetti, and where do you start? And I think that's the important thing there, is to say one needs to have a start and make a start. And I think the strategy and that vision is the right point. And you don't need to, as Laverne said, go big bang theory. You actually can start small and start to see just working on some kind of transformation, even in one of the functional areas, and see what that delivers for the business. I think there's a question there in the chat about, thanks Mia, about how do you convince people to come along for the journey? So I think that's a great question, and very happy, Laverne, if you also want to jump in here. I think one of it is, people are nervous of change, but I think if they can understand what's in it for them, that's critical, why you are doing it. So what is your story around the change? How it's going to benefit them as individuals, the benefits they're going to get from learning new skills. And I think also, the trust that you build in terms of that this is something that they can believe in and that they can trust in. I think your leadership plays an absolutely pivotal role here in terms of being role models, talking the talk, walking the walk, and really being inspiring in terms of their own personal adoption from a digital transformation perspective. Laverne, I don't know if there's anything you'd like to add just to that question.
Laverne is battling to get off mute. Maybe I can
Yeah.
just add a comment to that as well. We're dealing with a large mining customer, and that customer is looking to revamp the entire procurement supply chain. And as part of that engagement, they want to assess their suppliers from a digital readiness perspective. So what's that message? It's one thing to convince your customers to come along. What's going to happen is some of your customers will convince you and force you to come along on that journey as well. It's really just the sort of the two ends of that same stick, that it's sometimes you're going to get forced to come along as well. So you might as well just work with your customers in the same line, take them along on the journey. We've seen that customers do want to change. It's not like they're resistant. Often it's our perception of customers.
Yeah, Pieter, I think that's a really good comment, because it's almost coming at you from multi-dimensions. So it's not just that the shareholders are going to be putting pressure on you, but both customers, suppliers, and employees. You know, you're all part of the same drive to make the organization as successful as it can be. And each of those will require a different strategy and a different lens. But hopefully today we've given you a good view across all of those ecosystems.
Well, thanks, Pieter. Thanks, Maura and Laverne, for an extremely informative session. I hope everyone out there has enjoyed the content, and we trust that you find the insights shared with you of value, and that it will assist you in thinking to adapt and succeed in the year ahead and beyond 2021. We look forward to engaging with everyone during our upcoming webinars. Please don't hesitate to contact Sashin at sashin.daji@pwc.com if you have any questions regarding today's webinar, or if you would like to get in touch with us, or if you require any other assistance in terms of registrations for upcoming webinars. Thanks once again for joining us, and please stay safe, and may you have a wonderful day further and a weekend ahead. Goodbye, everyone.
Cheerio. Thank you.